I love our culture so much, so much, but we do not know what to say when it comes to miscarriage and infertility. I know their intentions were not to hurt me, but it did. And that's another reason, I will speak about this out loud, because, we can do better, we can be better, and not make people feel like it's their fault.
Infertility is finally being discussed. Headlines are highlighting Jennifer Aniston's past failed IVF cycles, and Michelle Obama shared her miscarriages and success with IVF in her autobiography. The shame and stigma of infertility is coming out of the shadows. But is that true for all communities? Here to discuss the taboo of infertility in the Latinx community is Andrea Helton León, known as Hot Mess IVF Mom on Instagram and TikTok. Andrea, welcome to Baby or Bust.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
How did you make the decision to share your journey in such a public way?
I decided to open up publicly after, I think, around 5-6 losses, because I didn't know anyone in my family, in my church community, which is also a Spanish congregation I go to. I didn't know anybody that went through this, like nobody.
When you say losses, Andrea, you mean miscarriages, 5 or 6
Yes, exactly.
miscarriages.
Sorry, in Spanish we say pérdidas, so it's losses, but yes, miscarriages. I had a total of 8 recurrent pregnancy losses, all conceived naturally. I did 2 IUIs that did not result into pregnancy. That was my first step into the fertility world. I went to the reproductive endocrinologist after 4 losses, and only because my OBGYN referred me. He did the right thing and referred me to reproductive endocrinology. Look, we're fun people. We like to party. We don't like to cry and hear about someone being depressed or going through horrible things. We like to have a good time, and we're very spiritual people too. So when it comes to this, it's like, just have faith, just have faith. And it's like, well, I feel like I'm giving it all my faith and it's not working. Like, I need to do something more. I can't just sit here and pray all day. I got to do something about this. I was inspired by stories like Gabrielle Union. She's incredible. She had 8 recurrent losses. And then I was really just inspired by her. Michelle Obama as well. I actually ended up naming my daughter Malia. Michelle Obama's daughter is also named Malia. One of her daughters is named Malia. It wasn't specifically for that reason, but I do admire her. I read her book. Anyways, going back to our community, I was actually talking to my mom before getting on this podcast. My mom's from Ecuador. I was like, Mom, why do you think we don't talk about this stuff? Like, why was it so hard for me to talk about this with you guys, and for you guys to want to even hear me out when it came to fertility treatments? And she was like, you know what? I think it's because we just don't talk about our feelings like that out loud, like mental health, anything like that. We just don't talk about it. It's not a thing. We shove that away. And I was like, that's true. We kind of just brush it under the rug and keep going with life and pretend it's not happening, because another thing is that we come from family, strong roots with family, and we're known to be fertile people and have lots of babies. And if not, you're looked at kind of weird. You kind of stand out. Because my husband and I, it took us 8 years to have our miracle baby. That's a long time. So of course, a lot of people in our community will look at us and be like, why don't you have kids? When are you going to have kids? And, when I tell them what's happening, I'm like, we keep having pregnancy losses and we don't know why. We've tried all the tests, everything. And they're like, try this special papaya from my country. I'm like, I don't think that's going to do anything. But I've tried a lot of weird foods. My grandma brought a lot of weird foods from Ecuador, and she was like, you got to eat this whatever nastiness she brought. I'm like, oh man. She's like, it's great for fertility. I don't even know what it is I put in my mouth, but I will tell you right now, it did not work. We would do the whole evil eye thing because we also believe in a lot of bad energy and how it can affect a lot of things with your body. So we did the egg cleanse. I don't know if you know what that is.
No, tell me all about it.
Okay, so that's kind of like when you have a raw egg. You don't crack it or anything, not yet at least, and you just have somebody or yourself rub it all over your body, head to toe, and it kind of just absorbs the evil eye energy. The raw egg kind of symbolizes the eye absorbing it, and then after that, you crack the egg in a glass of water and you then toss it. And I did that a few times. I still had losses. So I told my family, I was
Aw.
like, I don't think it's that. They also told me not to talk about things out loud. They warned me multiple times when I opened up on social media, especially when I blew up on TikTok. They were like, be careful because people will wish bad energy on you. They will wish bad things upon you. So don't announce pregnancy early. Don't share your journey, and I was like, I don't think that's what would cause my loss. I don't think that's what's going to cause me issues. It's definitely not that, guys. It doesn't make sense. Like, you're saying it out loud. It sounds silly. I still announced early. I shared my whole IVF journey out loud, and I'm really glad I did because for so long I felt silenced. And I don't know if you know this, I'm also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Mormon. Yeah, everyone's having babies. And the beginning of our marriage, we actually lived in Utah. Oh, that was the worst for my fertility situation because everybody had babies. Everybody, left and right. I was like, I have to get out of here.
When did you guys decide to start trying? Was it intentional and ready to start your family?
We got pregnant right away. We were those typical Mormons. Just got married super young. I was 20 years old. My husband was 24 years old. I got pregnant right away, literally a month later. There were some things that happened during the pregnancy that kind of indicated that it wasn't going to go well. But I made it to my 12-week appointment, and that's where it was seen that I had a miscarriage. Baby started growing at around 10 and a half weeks.
So many people sort of expect that, like, when you get pregnant, the next chapter in the story is a baby. And I'm just wondering, for you at age 20, kind of going in and getting that news, was it even on your radar? Had you known anybody that had had a miscarriage before, or was it a complete shock?
So I knew that my mom had 2 miscarriages, but she said it was really early. So I was like, oh, I'm in the clear. I'm good. Even my mom told me that when I was pregnant. She's like, you're good now, because if you were going to have a miscarriage, you would have had it already. So you're fine. And so I didn't worry about it. And then when I told them, my family was shocked because I had to tell them over the phone. My family was still in Maryland. So, yeah, we were this young couple. We didn't have our family, and we didn't know what to expect. The radiologist told me that I was going to most likely need a surgery. I was like, what are you talking about? A surgery? Everything just seemed like so surreal. Like, it just didn't feel like it was real life, because I was still pregnant. And so my parents were asking me what happened, what went wrong. There were just no answers. There is no answers. And I just had to go back home that day like that and, still be pregnant, but not pregnant. It was just a very confusing feeling. We also grieve really loud. So I was a complete disaster. I was like shouting because in the doctor's office, I didn't release my emotions like that. I was in shock. I did not, really cry there. I waited till we got in the car and I just broke down, and my husband was quiet, and I was calling my parents and telling them, like, I was just shouting, like, what the heck? Like, what happened? They showed me a lot of love. They really did.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm so glad. How does your community, like whether it's your church or your family or your loved ones, how in general do they deal with people who are struggling? You sort of talked about how you're young and getting married and just in these 2 different communities, whether it's the Latinx community or your Mormon church community where everybody was having babies, but you weren't. What did that feel like? And how did people react to you?
It felt awful. It felt isolating. I felt like my husband and I didn't really fit in anywhere. Everyone was kind of moving on, and we were just stuck at this stage for so long. And people around us told us So many comments. I've even been told it's because I have to repent. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just, you really build a mental toughness throughout this journey. And, I know my community, I love our culture so much, so much, but we do not know what to say when it comes to miscarriage and infertility. I know their intentions were not to hurt me, but it did. And that's another reason, I will speak about this out loud, because, we can do better, we can be better, and not make people feel like it's their fault, especially women. Being a female Latina, everyone's looking at me. They assume it's my fault. For so long, I didn't tell people that my husband also had male factor. I kind of just hid it from everybody, because even for him, he was like, I'm embarrassed of it. I'm ashamed of it. And I was like, I respected that, and I didn't tell anybody. And, now he's comfortable talking about it, because he saw how I was just publicly taking the hit from everybody. It's important that both male and female get tested in this process. All parties involved in the baby making process are tested. And my family, well, not really. I call everybody my family. That's such a Latino thing. Everybody involved in my life is kind of my family. My loved ones, I should say, point me to the path that this is faith related, that I did not have enough faith, and that I just needed to keep being faithful. Not once was it recommended from my loved ones to go speak to a doctor. What more can we do medically? What can we test for? Nothing like that. Everything was faith-based, and it made me feel like I wasn't doing enough. And it got to a point where it did affect me spiritually too. I'm like, am I not good enough? Am I not praying right? Am I not praying hard enough? I really, just took that hit, and my family or my loved ones would tell me not to share my story out loud. They would tell me because they were worried about the evil energy and bad wishes people would have upon me that would cause me more losses. It wasn't because they wanted to silence me, but they truly believed that this would cause me harm.
It's so different just in American society right now. I see so many celebrities and people that are really celebrated for sharing their struggles, and Brene Brown's whole message about the importance of being vulnerable. And you're getting a totally different message. It sort of seems wrapped up in even more shame. You're trying to reach out and share that you're struggling, that you're having these miscarriages, and you're not only being silenced by the people that love you. I mean, they're doing it out of love, and it sounds like they're really feeling like they're trying to help you by saying oh my gosh, don't talk about it, because it's just going to bring badness on yourself. It's just like shame within shame within shame.
It took a while for them to really come around, and I kind of used my spiritual side to kind of comfort them with that. I told them to open their scriptures. I was like, these are all stories that people use all the time in their daily life to help them. I feel like I have a story to share that will help people. And that's where my family really came around. And now they share my story out loud. Just last Sunday, my cousin called me, and she said that my mom shared my story at church in front of everybody, and everybody was in tears. And
Wow.
I was so proud of her. I was so proud because, for so long, it felt like we were just dealing with this darkness and silence. And now we've come a long way. And that's why this matters so much.
One of your messages that you really open up to when you're speaking is seeing a doctor sooner rather than later. And I'd love to know why you were hesitant in the beginning. You said you saw a doctor maybe after your fourth miscarriage, and kind of you're speaking the way a lot of my patients speak, and they say, oh, I wish I'd come to see a reproductive endocrinologist sooner. I'd love to know how that that hesitancy and, how you overcame that.
My OBGYN referred me to the reproductive endocrinologist after 4 losses. And when I told my family I was going to a fertility doctor, they were all kind of shocked, especially my loved ones that were Catholic. Catholicism is huge in the Latino community as well. I don't know if this is the case for all Catholics. I know there's a lot of branches, but my loved ones believe that IVF is evil or against God's will, and that it was playing God, all these things. And so I didn't know about IVF. I didn't even go into the clinic yet, and I was being told, don't do IVF. And so I go into the clinic with this mindset, and my doctor tells me, we're going to look through everything. We're going to do all this testing. We should consider IVF, but let's see how these come back. And I told him straight up, no, we are not doing IVF. And I went home. I was like, you're right. He was trying to push IVF on me. He was trying to sell to me. I just had this really ignorant mindset. And it wasn't until later when my fertility doctor is so amazing and so patient, and I think he's probably used to this, because I needed him to really break it down for me. Like, why would IVF with a certain protocol help me? And I'm really grateful for that, because I did feel like I didn't fit in at the clinic a lot of times. You go in the clinic, I see white people. I don't see Black people. I don't see Hispanics. I just see white people. And so it feels like, I don't know, I always told myself, even to my family, I'm like, this is a white person problem. I really didn't know why this was happening to me. I was also one of the youngest patients there. I was 21 years old when I was at the reproductive endocrinologist clinic. It took a while to warm up to the idea of IVF. And when we got there, it was after 8 losses. And I think my loved ones became just as hurt and desperate as I was. And so they were actually a lot more supportive than I thought they would be.
The longer you delay, the lower the chances of success. And I just want people to realize that, seeing a fertility doctor does not mean that you have to do IVF. And I'm so excited that path was successful for you. I just think that's wonderful. But I also just don't want people to feel like it's the only option that the fertility doctors kind of walk through. And
the finances, that's a huge thing, especially with Hispanics. A lot of us are coming here with immigrant parents. We're starting from the very bottom, where we don't have, the funds and the education when it comes to fertility treatments. And same, I didn't know that IVF was not the only treatment. When I was presented with IUI and, all these other things, I was like, wow, the fertility clinic is more than IVF. If it wasn't for my fertility doctor telling me about grants that I could apply for, I would have never looked. I wouldn't even thought that there would be a place, or even multiple places, that offer grants for fertility treatments. And I desperately needed it. I was just a medical assistant, living paycheck to paycheck. There was no way I was going to be able to afford IVF. Even with the grant, it was a little tough, but it was very much worth it. I don't talk bad about doctors, but I do bring awareness to moments in my journey where doctors could have done better. And there was one specific OBGYN. I lost coverage for the fertility clinic. I changed insurance because we couldn't afford our nice insurance that, had some coverage with the fertility clinic. So I went to a different OBGYN because my original one retired. And he told me, this is just bad luck. You're young, you are fertile, you're Hispanic. He did bring that up specifically. And I looked at my husband, and at the time I had 5 losses. I told him, that's not bad luck. Something's happening. We need to look into this. I really had to advocate for myself. That's where I also hope that patients like me speak up You know, it's unfortunate sometimes we do. There are doctors that are wonderful and listen, and then there are doctors that are kind of profiling us in a way.
Yes, thank you so much for talking about it. It's really hard to talk about, but I appreciate it because I know there's other people out there listening right now that have felt this way or even might have fear of seeing a doctor because they feel that they're going to be treated that way. And just the fact that you still advocated for your care and you didn't just walk away from that first visit and be like, oh, well, I'm sure that one doctor that I saw is right.
Thank you. I honestly thank my Latina side for that, for being so persistent, because that's the side that speaks up. That's the spicy side where I'm like, no, something is wrong. Someone do something about it. Because something my journey taught me is that you know your body more than anybody else. So if you feel like something's wrong, and I'm with a doctor that I feel like is not listening, I'm going to poke that doctor and say, no, test whatever you got to do. Do your best.
Can you think of any Hispanic celebrities that have shared miscarriages, fertility journeys? I just can't, and I'm wondering why.
No, I can't. Yeah. I can't. I've had this conversation a few times with, doctors and celebrities that I've sat with, and they would ask me, they're like, you know what, you're right. I can't think of a Latino or Hispanic person that has spoken out about this, that has, a huge platform. Because I was telling my mom right before this podcast that I was like, I'm nobody. I'm just a regular person. I am not a celebrity. I am not a doctor. Why do people care about my story so much? And it's because that community has nobody. Nobody advocating for them. And I'm glad to be that person. I am. And I don't want to be alone. I want more people to speak up. I need more people to speak up. I can't do this alone.
I see the comments in your social media posts. It's just flooded with people that are so thankful. I've never been able to talk to anybody else about this in my community. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It is very powerful.
It really matters. For the longest, I never mentioned that I was Hispanic. I never did. But I got a lot of comments in Spanish. And they just knew. They just knew. And I would respond to them in Spanish. I'm like, I got you. I'll talk to you. I want to listen to you. Now it's hard to keep up with my messages because my platforms have been growing. But I try to the best I can because I know that there's not a lot of resources written in Spanish, spoken about in Spanish. And there's just not a lot of people that look like me that speak about this stuff. So they kind of look at me for help.
What do you know now that you wish that you could tell that younger version of you?
I would tell myself that it was never my fault. And to just tell people to shut up. They clearly didn't care about my feelings, so I should have spoken up a long time ago because my silence was only hurting me, and I just should have said something earlier.
Are there any stories where maybe the first time your husband kind of realized and shared with you that he realized, like, wow, you are carrying this burden?
Here's what happened. We were at the fertility clinic and we did an IUI. Well, we were preparing for an IUI, and the fertility doctor said, your sperm count is really low. Like, this is the sperm count of a 60-year-old man. And my husband was so hurt. And he said there were some abnormalities in his shape, but wasn't too concerned because I was able to get pregnant. But either way, my husband had devastation in his face, and this was something, we had to look into. And when I told him I was going to, tell my family about it because they like hearing updates, my husband said, no, I don't want people to know about this. I truly felt like he felt less of a man because of this issue. And he tried to research everything he could do to increase his sperm count. And I would constantly remind him, I was like, the doctor said it's fine. It takes one to get an embryo to get me pregnant. and he just wouldn't accept it. It really, really hurt his feelings. And one day I was telling my best friend about it, one of my best friends, and she has a bigger mouth than I do. And my husband was like, I don't like it when you tell people about my fertility issues. And I was like, I'm not telling people, I'm telling her because I want to know her thoughts. And my friend said, look, everybody's looking at her. Everybody thinks it's her. How do you think she feels? And my husband looked at me. He was like, you're right. Like, he didn't really realize that I was just taking the hit from our community and loved ones, that it was just my fault. It's me. Something's wrong with me. And he slowly came to open up, especially when we joined a support group. He was with other males, and it is actually a really diverse group. And that is where he felt more comfortable talking about it and realized how common it was.
Do you think this experience has changed your relationship with your husband and your family?
Oh, yes. I'm never ashamed to say that it affected our marriage. It absolutely did. You know, it's a lot of losses, and we were having troubles understanding each other and not knowing how to support each other or comfort each other as we're both handling these experiences. And now we're just completely different people. Like, he's amazing. He is one of my biggest advocates. He will do silly TikToks with me just to help me spread a good message about, you know, fertility education. He has changed so much, and me as well. You know, we've both changed and blossomed into people that love even deeper now and truly appreciate all the little moments that we longed for so long.
Andrea, how can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram and on TikTok. My username is HotMessIVFMom.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with the brave and inspirational Andrea León. She is doing so much for her own community, sharing her story and grief, miscarriage, infertility, things that are not talked about in the Latinx community. And she just reminds me that sharing stories is so important, and that truly we all have more in common than we do different, no matter what community we are in. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson and Nick Pinella for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.